Paul Watson from Sea Shepherd believes that direct action is often the only way to get results in the eco battle that dominates the 21st century. He talks to me in this interview about his vision of the future and how planet Earth can survive pretty well without us. And maybe the core of all eco campaigns is the survival of the human race and how it can live in harmony with nature. Okay, so it's John Robb here interviewing Captain Paul Watson from Sea Shepherd. An amazing life, tackling all the issues that are affecting the planet head on, literally head on. I mean, what I'd like to ask you now, we're currently in a very crisis point in the planet, a crisis point that you've been predicting for a long time. Are you actually optimistic about the future?
Well, I'm neither optimistic nor pessimistic.
Yeah.
I learned a lesson a long time ago that what you do is you concentrate on the present, and what you do in the present will define the future. So we focus on that, and the future will be what the future will be. But it will depend upon the passion, the courage, and the imagination of people doing what they're doing now.
I mean, what kind of opportunities do you think there are to make the change?
I don't know if human societies will change if it means giving up material comforts and other things. But I think that nature has a way of forcing people to adapt to changing circumstances. And that's most likely what's going to happen. I mean, the warning signs have been there for decades, about climate change, about environmental degradation, diminishment of ecosystems and species, emerging zoonotic transmission of viruses. It's all been there for decades. And people have virtually ignored it because their priorities are economic and material gain and political realities that have no basis in actual reality.
I mean, what are the key things that you're going to be concentrating on after this, or the key things that the environmental movement itself should be concentrating on? Because there's such a plethora of causes, isn't there? I mean, if we had to handpick a few just to make the changes that are needed for now.
Well, the strength of any ecosystem is dependent upon diversity. Therefore, the strength of any movement has to be dependent upon diversity. So whether that approach is litigation, legislation, education, direct action, or interventions, it's all points to the same thing. I mean, people really have to use their skills and their abilities and harness those to their passions and their imagination and courage to make a difference. So, like for instance, with the case with Dale, Vince, he's working on a new technology, as alternative energy, and that's a wonderful approach, and that's where his skills and abilities lie. Sea Shepherd, we focus on intervening against illegal activities, poaching, overfishing, that kind of thing. And we've been doing that quite successfully. But there's a lot of people who are making progress in the courts, or even more difficult in legislative bodies. And of course, then there's people who are taken to the streets and doing what they can. So it's a very diverse movement overall.
So yeah, so like a broad coalition.
It's a coalition of people who don't even know that they're in a coalition, really.
So, I mean, do you work with all these other people, or do you work a lot in isolation?
Strangely enough, we actually work with governments. For a long time, we were considered to be vigilantes. They're out there on the high seas intervening against illegal activities. But when various governments and agencies saw how successful we were being, then we developed partnerships. So right now, as of 2015, when we started this, actually we started in 1999 with a partnership with the Galapagos National Park to protect the Galapagos National Park with the government of Ecuador. But now we have partnerships in Africa with Benin and Gambia, São Tomé, Namibia, Tanzania, Liberia, and partnerships in South America with Colombia, with Costa Rica, Panama, and Peru. And what that means is that we provide the resources and the volunteers, and they provide the authority for us to go in and do things within their territorial waters. Outside of their territorial waters, we still operate under the guidance of the United Nations World Charter for Nature, which allows for non-government organizations to intervene to uphold international conservation law. So we do what we can within the boundaries of the law and of practicality.
It's ironic you mentioned Costa Rica there because they once had an arrest warrant out on you, didn't they?
They had an arrest warrant on me, and to show you how political that was, that those charges were dismissed with the election of a new government. So I
Mm.
got a call from the environment minister, the new environment minister of Costa Rica, saying that those charges would be dismissed and I'd be welcome to come to Costa Rica. Now, if it was judicial, they wouldn't have been able to do that, but it really just shows you the political nature of what they were doing. And both Costa Rica at the time and Japan now continuing are really using Interpol as their tool for to repress any dissent. I am on the Interpol red list for Japan. And the Interpol Red List is designed for serial killers, war criminals, and major drug traffickers. And I'm the only person on the history of that list to be put on there for trespassing. you know? And but we are working on that. And I don't think Japan is really putting much effort into it because they've never once made a request to the United States to extradite me, even though they know I'm here. When I was in France for 2 years, they made no request to the French government to do it. So I think they put me on there just to inconvenience me because I could go into a country where somebody might actually, take action on their requests. So, but it didn't stop us. In fact, it made us stronger. In 2012, when Japan came after me personally and after Sea Shepherd in the US as an organization, we decided to become a global movement, which is what we are now. So we're in 42 different countries. They're all separate entities because we just, we realize that you can stop an individual and you can shut down an organization, but you can't stop a movement. And so it made us much stronger.
Mm-hmm. I mean, so there must be some grain of optimism in the fact that governments are now dealing with you directly, sort of treating you as a renegade and an outsider. So what's kind of caused that, like, for want of a better expression, that sea change in their attitude?
I think that we have demonstrated that we've been successful. In 2015, we undertook the longest pursuit of a poacher in maritime history when we chased the toothfish poaching vessel Thunder from the coast of Antarctica to equatorial West Africa, a 110-day chase, and it ended with them sinking their own ship to destroy their evidence, and we had to rescue their crew. And I think and we were working with Interpol on that. So I think that various countries saw what we could do. And, we were pirates for a long time. But if you look at the history of piracy, at some point, the pirates began to work for governments. Like Henry Morgan shut down piracy in Panama. He became a real pirate when they made him governor of Jamaica. But,
Yeah, the same here with Francis Drake and Walter Raleigh, who I mean, it's a bit like a terrorist, isn't it? It's one, freedom fighter or a terrorist. And I suppose a pirate fits into those.
When I set up Sea Shepherd in 1977, I set up a strategy which I call aggressive nonviolence. And after 43 years, we've never injured anybody. We've never suffered any injuries. And what that means is that we'll be aggressive, but we're not going to hurt anybody. And we've been consistent on that. In 2010, I was invited by the FBI to give a lecture at the FBI headquarters in Quantico. And they actually paid me to do it. So I came there, and after giving the lecture, one of the agents said, well, Sea Shepherd walks pretty fine line when it comes to the law. And I said, yeah, but does it really matter how fine that line is as long as you don't actually cross the line? And they really couldn't argue with that.
I mean, how easy is it to not cross the line when you're in the high seas in a very high tension situation? It must be difficult to keep within these parameters.
No, you don't let your emotions take over, and so it doesn't become a personal thing. Really, you realize what they're doing is illegal. That you intervene in that, and you do it in a way that won't hurt anybody. Now, when people say, "Well, you damage property," yes, we do, but that property is being used for illegal activities, and I don't see anything wrong with that at all. That was tested in 2011. We found an illegal bluefin tuna operation off the coast of Libya. It was a Maltese company. And when I determined that they were certainly operating illegal, they didn't even have an EU inspector on board. We put divers into the net. We cut the nets. We released 800 of those tuna, and they got away. Now, I didn't think anything of it at the time, but a year later, when we were in Scotland, the British courts arrested my vessel for destruction of private property. And I said, well, yeah, but the property was by poachers. They were operating illegally. Well, it doesn't matter. It was private property. So we had to go to court. I had to put a bond on the vessel of £750,000 to release the vessel. But we went to court and we won. But the lawyers for the Maltese company said, well, we'll just throw money at Sea Shepherd until we destroy them. That's exactly what he said. And they went to the Court of Appeals and they won. And then we took it to the Supreme Court in Britain and we won. So they ended up having to pay us £1.5 million in damages for that. So we have won every single civil case that we've entered into.
So it's a big part of Sea Shepherd is also a very key understanding of international law and all its different variances in each country.
Yes, and international law is extremely complex because, there's, for one thing, most people just ignore it. For instance, Australia took Japan to the International Court in The Hague in 2013 for their illegal operations in the Southern Ocean, and the International Court of Justice ruled in Australia's favor and said, yes, this is an illegal activity. Well, Japan stopped for 1 year and then resumed again in 2015. They just basically ignored the ruling of the International Court of Justice. And that came back to bite them in their rear end because a couple of years later, in a dispute between the Court of Justice between the Philippines and China, the court ruled in the favor of the Philippines against China. And China just simply ignored the ruling. And Japan was the first country to jump on to China and say, you can't ignore that. And the Chinese came back and said, well, you can. So why can't we?
Yeah. So the countries, the governments are coming on board and speaking to you. What's driving this? Is it business? They're realizing that even capitalism needs conservation, or is it a genuine idea that you have to look after the environment and actual care in high places in government?
Well, in the case of Africa, I think these countries are quite concerned that foreign fishing is destroying the livelihoods of artisanal fishermen in their own countries who are suffering because of that. And this is the kind of thing that led to piracy in Somalia. The real pirates of Somalia were the European and Asian fishing fleets that went in and plundered their waters and impoverished all the fishermen. Those pirates are just really impoverished fishermen. So I predicted years ago that this same thing is going to happen in Mauritania and Senegal and all these other places unless this is brought under control. And I think that many of these governments are recognizing that the real threat of that they have to contain and control the illegal plundering of resources within their territorial waters.
And do you making much headway in the larger governments and the larger countries as well?
Interestingly enough, there was a report from the United States Naval College about how the U.S. government should actually do what Sea Shepherd does, and also work with Sea Shepherd. Because I think the paper that was done was on the role of non-government states or non-government entities in upholding international conservation law. And so there's a real need for this. I mean, we have to have enforcement. All we're asking for is the same level of enforcement against illegal fishing as governments are presently using to control illegal drug trafficking.
I mean, are you also very wary of greenwashing? Like from your own country, Canada, with Trudeau, who kind of says one thing and he does talk beautifully about it, but kind of does another. In the pockets of the oil industry, etc.
Now, most politicians are the same. I always say the difference between Trump and Trudeau is that Trump at least was honest about what he was doing.
Yeah.
Trudeau was the darling of the COP21 conference in Paris and went back as pro-tar sands, pro-pipeline, pro-super tankers. He betrayed the indigenous peoples and all the promises that he made. I think sometimes when you get elected, they take you into a back room and explain reality to you from their point of view.
Yeah, I always wonder if it's, when you're running a large country like that, you'll actually drive in a tank and you can't turn it around, no matter how much you think you can.
I was actually quite surprised that this week when Boris Johnson came out and condemned Japanese whaling. I noticed he didn't condemn Norwegian or Danish whaling, but he came out and condemned Japanese whaling.
Yeah, he just, yeah.
But it's a little embarrassing because Japan is now the second largest whaling country in the world. Norway is number one, so he really should say something about Norway.
I guess that's the trouble. That's the advantage of what you've got, really, because with Sea Shepherds, you don't have to rely on other people in your ear. You just make your own agenda, don't you?
Yes, well, we're apolitical in that respect. Yeah, I mean, the right wing calls us leftists, the left wing calls us right wing. So we got to. I think that really illustrates that we're neither one or the other. If both sides are attacking us for not being what they want us to be.
So, I mean, what drives you personally? Is there a sentimental love of nature, or is it a practical love of nature, or both mixed together?
Well, I've been doing this all my life. I started when I was, when I was 10 years old. I spent the summer swimming with a family of beavers in eastern Canada, and the next summer, when I went back when I was 11, all the beavers were gone, and trappers had taken them out. And that made me very angry as a child. And that winter, I walked the trap lines and freed animals and destroyed the trap. So I guess I've been doing it for the last 60 years, the same thing. So I haven't really changed. I was youngest founding member of Greenpeace when I was 19, and then I set up Sea Shepherd when I was 26. So I've been doing this ever since.
So when you set up Greenpeace, it was about a 12-year thing. It was a small organisation with big aims. And were your aims more, let's say, more energized, more radical, or did everybody have a radical agenda when it started?
Well, it's a little complicated. Greenpeace started with a demonstration at the U.S.-Canada border against the nuclear testing in Amchitka Island, and there was two groups that came together: the Quakers, that was where you get the peace side, and the Sierra Club, which is where you got the green side.
Mhm.
I was actually different than the other two because my concern was that Amchitka was a wildlife preserve, and you couldn't take a rifle onto the island, but here you are blowing up a 5 megaton bomb under it, and it had killed a number of sea lions and otters. So that I was probably unique in my joining that. So at one of the early meetings of the Don't Make a Wave committee, somebody left the meeting and flashed a peace sign, and Bill Darnell said, we'll make it a Greenpeace. And Bob Hunter said, whoa, great name for the boat. So we called it the Greenpeace. And in 1972, we changed the name of the Don't Make a Wave committee to the Greenpeace Foundation. And so that's how that all started. In fact, in 1974, when Greenpeace got involved with the whales, the Quaker side of it dropped out. They were really not very happy about that at all. And when you think of the history, the Yankee whaling fleet was owned by the Quakers. So
All
I don't
right.
know if that had anything to do with it, but they weren't happy about it. They wanted to focus on the peace thing. So Bob Hunter put it in the direction that it eventually came, and then of course it evolved and it changed, and now it's a international organization that is certainly not doing the same thing that it began, but that's the way things go. They have a role within the environmental movement, but it's not the one that we originally intended for it.
So you still see a value in Greenpeace, maybe as a populist door opener?
Yeah, well, I think that every group has a value in a way, but personally, I don't. But I recognize that people find it inspiring and a vehicle that they can get involved in. But there's always emerging groups that are coming. It's a constant evolution. I mean, you got Extinction Rebellion, and got Greta Thunberg's efforts. I mean, it's a constant evolution of approaches, and that's a good thing. It's always a growing movement.
Is it a constant evolution of approaches because the people who are destroying the planet have a constant evolution of approaches, or is it just trying to find the approach that actually delivers a knockout blow?
Yeah, things change. What's acceptable now certainly wasn't acceptable 20, 30 years ago. And so tactics have to change. In 1983, I blockaded St. John's Harbor in Newfoundland and kept the entire sealing fleet from coming out for 2 weeks. You can't do that today. I wouldn't even try. So that just shows you how things have changed, and we've got to adapt to that. So how we've adapted is to working in partnership with governments now, and we're finding that they're receptive. It wouldn't work unless they were receptive. But we haven't changed, but we found that things change with us, and that's the way I've always wanted to be. We're not going to conform to what they want us to be. They have to conform to what we as a movement want them to be.
So, in a sense, trying to remain one step ahead.
Trying to do that, absolutely. And also, we don't back. For instance, we were working very closely with France, and the French government and everything was very supportive. And then suddenly, the French started killing dolphins in the Bay of Biscay. So what do? We have to go against it. So we're going to rile up people in France because of that. But we're not going to back off just because people we've been working with have decided that they're going to do this and not do anything about it. The killing of dolphins by the French trawling fleet is illegal, and France and the European Union must do something to shut it down.
So even though you kind of engage these days, you still have a steely resolve, a steely inner centre that's prepared to make that stand.
Well, we pride ourselves on not being corruptible and not being influenced by political motivations or economic motivations in that. And we could be a much bigger organization, our movement, if we wanted to play the game. Like, for instance, Greenpeace brings in 350 million euros a year, and they got 3 ships. We bring in $12 million a year, and we have 14 ships. Our strength lies in the passion of our volunteers. The reason we're not as big as Greenpeace is we're not going to be all things to all people. This is what we do, and people either support it or they don't. So when people say, well, I used to support you when you did this, but I'm not going to support you for doing that. And I said, well, then don't. Well, we're not you join us. We didn't join you. We're not going to be what you want us to be. And so we have a limited, the tent is much smaller for us than it is for some of these big organizations who try to be everything to everybody.
So in a sense, in pop culture terms, you're like the punk rock version, and Greenpeace are like the hippie version.
It could be. It could be. I mean, we don't spend people's money on advertising or direct mail campaigns. You don't see us out on the streets with clipboards asking you to, sign a lifetime contract to support us or anything like that. People either support us or they don't, and it's wonderful if they do. But our real strength lies in the hundreds and hundreds of volunteers who are on our ships, who are cleaning beaches, who are pulling ghost nets out of the oceans. This is a hands-on organization, a hands-on movement. And we want people to be involved, not just to be supporters.
It's just the crux of what caused the initial split from you and Greenpeace when you were voted out 11-1, and you were the one that voted against, because you were on the board, weren't you? Would it be a board or on the
it was
the
a
panel?
board. There's a lot of misunderstanding about it. I was simply voted off the board. I wasn't kicked out of Greenpeace. I could have stayed with Greenpeace, but I chose not to. I decided to set up my Sea Shepherd. The interesting thing about it is almost all of those board members eventually joined the Sea Shepherd, including Bob Hunter and Rob Maroney, Al John. All these guys were later crewed on Sea Shepherd ships and were part of Sea Shepherd. And, because they themselves got turfed out of Greenpeace. So there's not a single founding director of Greenpeace who's still with Greenpeace. They either passed away or else they were forced out of the organization, but most of them were forced out.
Was this because you wanted a more direct action, hands-on approach at the time?
Well, I think that we're just continuing to do what we did originally with Greenpeace, and then Greenpeace changed, and we didn't. A couple of years ago, I couldn't believe it. Greenpeace then apologized for what we had done with the seals back in the 70s. And I said, who are you people to apologize for what we did? You didn't do it. Most of you weren't even born, and yet you're apologizing for us. That's not a very sincere apology on that. And then they even went even further when Greenpeace came out and said, well, maybe it's time to support the fur industry as long as it's based in Greenland culture or something like that. And then one of their directors is posing with a sealskin coat. And I said, Bob Hunter and these guys turn over in their grave if they saw what you guys were doing now. And then their position on whaling is that they're not necessarily against whaling, but they're against commercial whaling, but some whaling may be okay. I mean, this kind of, waffling on things like that is what turned a lot of their supporters away from them.
So why do they talk themselves into those positions? Is it because there is a lot of people putting a lot of money in there and having a lot of influence, or is it just they're starting to lose interest in the battle?
Well, they always want to be politically correct, and the head of Greenpeace at one point was recruited from South Africa with Amnesty International. He was anti-apartheid guy, and that's great, but that's not what Greenpeace was. And so he decided, and this is where I got my problem with him, is he said, The solution to solving environmental problems is to alleviating world poverty. Now that sounds very nice, but it's also impossible. You know, how do you address impoverishment of nearly, in a population of 8 billion people? Where do you even going to begin? We simply don't have the resources to do that. And so this is a real problem. It's going to be that we can't bring everybody in the world up to the level of North American or European standards. What we're going to have to do is bring North American, European standards down. That's the only way we're going to survive, because the resources simply aren't there. It's the three laws of ecology: the law of diversity, that the strength of an ecosystem is dependent upon diversity within it; the law of interdependence, that all those species are interdependent with each other; and the law of finite resources, that there's a limit to growth and a limit to carrying capacity. And as we steal the carrying capacity of other species, it causes diminishment in both diversity and interdependence.
I mean, with what you're doing, with it's about all the species, the interdependence of all the species. Is it important to somehow maintain every single species on the planet, or is it actual natural wastage as well, or is there like a little grey area in between where you can't work out whether to let something go or not?
Well, we don't really know, because we're not that intelligent when it comes to the ecological matters. What species is important, what species isn't. There's this tree in Mauritius, for instance, which was going extinct, and botanists couldn't figure out why. And then they found out that the dodo bird, when it was there, this tree could only propagate by passing through the gizzard of a dodo bird. So when the dodo bird went extinct, then that was pretty much a death sentence for that tree. But there's other species that are dependent upon that tree. Now, there are certain species which are absolutely essential for our survival. Phytoplankton. If phytoplankton disappears in the sea, and it's been reduced 40% since 1950, we don't live. We don't live on a planet with no phytoplankton. It provides up to 70% of the oxygen that we breathe. Other species like worms and trees and bees, we'd be in a big sorry state if we were to lose those. A couple of years ago, I was called up by a reporter from the Fox network in the US, and he says, "Did you say that bees, trees, and worms and fish were more important than people?" I said, "Yeah, I said that." So how could you say anything so outrageous? And I said, "Well, for the very fact that they're more important than people, because they can live here without us, but we can't live here without them if they go to die. That makes them ecologically more important than we are." I think the best way to look at it is, if you look at the planet as a spaceship, which is what it is, traveling around this universe and everything, and every spaceship has a life support system, provides the air we breathe, regulates climate and temperature, provides the food we eat. And that life support system is regulated and run by a crew of Earthlings, not us. We humans, we're passengers. We're having a wonderful time amusing ourselves. But what we're doing is murdering crew members, trees and fish and phyto, all these things that are running the actual crew. And there's only so many crew members you can kill before the machinery begins to break down. And I think that's what's happening now.
So in a sense, the drive of Sea Shepherd, which is ecological, looking after all the species, one of the underlying things is actually very pro-human.
Well, it is, because here's the thing. Everybody says we've got to save the planet. No, we don't. The planet doesn't need saving. The planet's going to survive. What we have to do is save humanity from humanity. If you look at every major mass extinction event in the history of this planet, there's been 5 prior to the one that we're in now, called the Anthropocene, because we're responsible for it. What did they all have in common? It took 18 to 20 million years for a full recovery. So 18 to 20 million years, no matter what we do, this will be a beautiful planet again. It will recover. The fact is, will we survive? Personally, there's absolutely no way that we'd be around 18 to 20 million years from now anyway. But, at least we could have maybe a million years. I don't know, if we do things properly. But I don't know. Everything changes. I mean, 65 million years ago, if an asteroid had not hit this planet, we wouldn't be here today. There might be an intelligent species of saurians that evolved to be what we are, but all ecological conditions define what life will be on this planet.
I like the idea, and I'm fascinated by the idea that the most dominant species, which we are at the moment, is also the most vulnerable, and also, in a sense, almost the most useless on the planet.
But we're not the most dominant species. We think we are. But
Mm.
this planet is run by bacteria, viruses, insects, bees, fungus. These are the foundation of life on this planet. Well, we're just a figment of well, I always call ourselves overly conceited naked apes who've become divine legends in our own mind. I think the real problem that we have is our philosophical view of the world, which is anthropocentric, which is it's all about us. Everything's about us. We're the center of creation, the center of the universe. I think we have to look to indigenous cultures and look at what they believe in traditionally, which is biocentrism. We're part of it all. Everything's connected to everything else. If we don't learn to live in harmony with these other species, we can't survive. And that's one of the reasons that Sea Shepherd has the support of the Aboriginal communities in Australia, the Maori in New Zealand, and we're the only ships in the world that are allowed to fly the flag of the Five Nations of the Confederacy of the Iroquois, which is given to us by the Mohawks, because we understand when the Iroquois say that you make no decision in your life until you take into account the consequences of that decision on all future generations.
Mm. The really profound wisdoms. Yeah. I mean, have you ever thought about moving into politics, or do you find it so tainted and compromising? Do you find it's more effective to be a pressure group and on the outside?
I have run. I ran for member of parliament in Canada twice, and I ran for mayor of Vancouver twice. But I didn't do it to win. I did it because it's a wonderful forum to get your points across. In fact, during the mayoralty election in Vancouver, I was actually concerned for a moment there that I was actually going to win the election. And I'd be stuck at some desk in Vancouver for 2 years, but I didn't. But it did give me the opportunity to talk about things that politicians just do not talk about. If you run, and I'd encourage anybody to run for member of parliament, everything, get up there with side by side with the guys who are running and get your point of view across. Don't even consider, thinking about whether to win. Look on it as a way to educate on that. It's funny, when I ran for Vancouver, mayor of Vancouver, 64 people ran for that position. And I came in fourth after the three major parties. But at one point, the two of the leading candidates were making such fools of themselves. That's why I thought I might win.
I mean, what is the future of Sea Shepherd itself? Is it still going to be on the high seas, or is it or combined with this dealing with governments directly, and with the law and lawyers and etc. as well? Is it a multi-pronged, multifaceted campaign now?
It is. We have 14 ships right now, and we have 42 chapters around the world. And they define their own campaigns many times. I can't keep up with the number of campaigns that we have. I mean, we're fighting poachers on the island of Mayotte between Madagascar and Mozambique. We're working off the coast of West Africa. We're in the Sea of Cortez protecting the endangered vaquita. We're in the Baltic protecting porpoises. We're in this. In the Bay of Biscay, protecting dolphins. We're in the Faroe Islands. We're cleaning beaches in the middle of the Indian Ocean. I mean, it's a global thing, and the strength of it is the fact that it's a movement. Hundreds and hundreds of people involved actively. I can't even keep track of the number of captains and officers I have right now. I mean, but this is great. It's not about me anymore. At one point, I put it together and everything like that, but I don't have to worry about it any. It's a force that's under its own power right now. And I got some wonderful leaders: Lamia Salami, who's director of Sea Shepherd France; Rob Reed, who's director Sea Shepherd in the UK; Jeff Hansen in Australia. These are great leaders, and they're doing a wonderful job.
Where do you find this insane energy from? This is not like interviewing a 70-year-old man who's been on the high seas for years and campaigning solidly. You seem like a 25-year-old who's just started.
Well, I feel like a 25-year-old. I got a 4-year-old son, and I spend a lot of time with him. That certainly keeps me busy and young. I've never ever, Parley Moa once said that I never grew up, and and he's right. I feel that I don't think that people should grow up. I think that they should keep their young passions and beliefs and that, and not get jaded, I suppose, about people say you got to get realistic. I said, I'm probably much more realistic than you, because I can see the world the way it is, not the world the way you want it to pervert it to be. and that. But also, I'm really energized by the fact that there are so many young people today who are understanding that they can make a difference, that all they have to do is get involved. And this is one of the things we've been teaching with Sea Shepherd all through these years. And for instance, back in 1979, I had an 18-year-old crew member who came to me after we had this big fight with the Sierra pirate whaling operation. He came to me and says, "We got to do something about protecting chimpanzees in laboratories." I said, "Alex, this is Sea Shepherd. We're not going to go into laboratories, but if you're so passionate about it, why don't you do something about it?" "Well, what can I do?" "I don't know. Use your imagination. Come up with something." So he went back to Maryland in the US, got a job in a laboratory, spent a year documenting everything that was going on there, took it to the Washington Post and to the television stations, exposed it and shut it down, and then founded a group called the People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. By one 18-year-old who was motivated to understand that he could make a difference. Back in 1983, I got a call from a man in Glasgow, and he said, "They're killing seals up here in the Orkney Islands. What are you going to do about it?" I said, "Well, I don't know. I'm on the other side of the world. What are you going to do about it? You're in Scotland." And he said, "Well, what can I do?" And so we helped him set up Sea Shepherd in Scotland, and he and a bunch of volunteers went to the Orkneys, and they were really enthusiastic. They walked up to the sealers, literally pulled the rifles out of their hands and threw the rifles into the ocean. All got arrested, and then but they raised so much publicity from what they did that we raised enough money to buy that island, which is now a seal sanctuary. So again, when people ask me, "What are you going to do?" I said, "Well, what are you going to do about it? You're just as capable of doing this as I am."
So the real strength of an organization like Sea Shepherd is about empowerment.
I think so. I think that's something that we've endeavored to do for the last 43 years, is to empower individuals so that they can make a difference. Like right now, one of my ex-captains is in the Mediterranean. I mean, her passion was rescuing refugees. What'd she do? She got Banksy to get her a boat. She's out there off the coast of Africa rescuing refugees. That's what she wants to do, and all power to her. And so there's so many of our veterans who have gone on to do wonderful things like that.
I mean, what's your relationship with people like Extinction Rebellion and Greta Thunberg? Do you all kind of know each other, or do you all sort of kind of nod at each other online or something? Or
I've spoken with Greta Thunberg, especially when she was in New York. We had one of our vessels there. Her people came down to. We had a big gathering at the UN, and I told her that I certainly support her. I mean, she's done incredible things. I mean, what 16-year-old is going to sit down with prime ministers and presidents and basically give it to them?
Yeah.
I mean, Trudeau held a thing with her, and it was from Trudeau's point of view. "Oh, this is wonderful. I'm going to do a thing with Greta Thunberg, make me look really good." And she just said, "What are you doing?"
Yeah.
Challenged them. She wasn't intimidated by them, which is really good. Extinction Rebellion, again, that's a movement, and I don't really know if it has much. I don't really know the leadership or anything like that, but I certainly support any effort to make people aware of what the future is facing, because we will go extinct if we don't do something about it.
With Dale, sorry. Yeah.
I am encouraged in the United States now that John Kerry has been put in charge of climate change, and we've worked with him in the past, and so that's very encouraging. Certainly can't be as bad as the last 4 years.
I know, that was an example of how to do everything wrong, wasn't it? So with Dale Vince, who's a very big supporter of yours, of course, he uses your colours for his football club, the world's only vegan football club, etc. He boils down the core issues, to food, transport, and energy. I mean, can you boil down to key issues, or do you prefer to keep it as, a campaign here, campaign there, intervention here, empowerment there?
Well, I think you have to concentrate on what you're good at. I mean, Dale concentrates on those, where he's very good at, with technology and alternative energy, and he's doing wonderful things. And but we all have to choose what it is that we're good at, what we want to do. Harness your imagination and your courage to your passion, and go forward and do it.
Brilliant. Well, thanks a lot, Paul. That was really inspiring. Great stuff.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, thanks. And hopefully I'll bump into you somewhere on the other side of this pandemic.
Where are you based?
Manchester.
Oh, Manchester. Well, at some point, we'll get to go back over to Europe. I should be off the red list here by the end of this year, I'm pretty sure, but it doesn't really matter because of the COVID thing. But
Or does that mean, so technically you would not be allowed to come into the UK?
no, I can go to France, but I wouldn't trust going into the UK at this point. Right now, I can't go to Canada. I'm a Canadian citizen, but Canadian government has made it very clear to me that they'll send me to Japan if I enter the country.
Oh, really? So if you went to the UK, that could be the danger as well, that they could.
The only country that I feel safe in, the only two countries I feel safe in is, well, actually three, really. It's ironic. The United States, France, and Costa Rica.
Oh, really? Yeah, that's because
Costa Rica has made it clear that I'd be welcome to come to the country.
Mm-hmm. And the USA, is it because they won't have an extradition deal with Japan, or is it all?
I'm a U.S. citizen, and it's pretty difficult to extradite a U.S. citizen anywhere, really.
Oh, so yeah, so you're not a Canadian citizen anymore.
I'm a Canadian citizen and a U.S.
Yeah, I know you're from Canada originally. Yeah, so.
But I hold both passports.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Yeah, you can do that.
Well, hopefully you'll be off the red list. Yeah, and well, okay. Well, yeah, sorry, Paul. Yeah, thanks.
And my wife, she's got a Russian passport, so we've got it all covered over.
Yeah. Well, I think going to Russia, anything could happen, couldn't it? So
You never know.
Excellent. All right, brilliant. Thanks a lot then. Yeah.
Well, thanks.
Okay. Thanks. Bye.